Look like the cream of wheat, man, is cooked and ready to serve. Now available in paperback and e-readers, John Haynes, Godbreaker. The man who rules the world takes on the Asgardian god of thunder in this action-packed, all-new John Haynes series adventure. Get your copy of John Haynes, Godbreaker in paperback and e-readers at online booksellers everywhere. Better get the coleslaw, y'all, cause we're having us a barbecue.
We have the video message. Let's go to that right now from Mayor Adams.
We've achieved. I cannot continue my re-election campaign. The constant media speculation about my future and the campaign finance board's decision to withhold millions of dollars have undermined my ability to raise the funds needed for a serious campaign. I hope that over time, New Yorkers will see this city thrive under our leadership, and that policies we put in place should be continued and expanded. I hope you will see that despite the headlines and innuendo, I always put you before me.
Of course, that's only part of the video, but that is the video of the mayor of New York, Eric Adams, bowing out of the race.
Now, on Sunday, New York Mayor Eric Adams made a videotaped response where he decided to say he was dropping out of the race for re-election as mayor of New York City. And this was a surprise to many as related to Eric Adams, who said previously that he was going to be in this race to the end, but he may have possibly been looking to get out of this race because he wanted to help out the blue and red parties and because of a possible offer of an ambassadorship to Saudi Arabia. Now, with Eric Adams leaving the election in such an ignominious fashion, it's a major fall of grace for the cream of wheat, man. And it's a major fall from grace because usually in New York here, what happens with Democratic incumbent candidates is that they can easily coast to victory. Unfortunately, New York Mayor Eric Adams basically wound up tripping over his own feet even before he started running his own campaign. And that's what led to the many scandals that took place in the last year of Eric Adams' term as mayor, is that he basically wound up getting caught up in a lot of scandals as related to different things that went on as related to New York City politics. However, when I look at the bigger picture of what happened with Eric Adams, it basically shows me how he didn't really understand the subtle politics transpiring around him. And because he didn't understand the subtle politics transpiring around him as related to the system of white supremacy, he wound up becoming yet another pawn easily taken off the chessboard of politics here in New York. Now, when it comes to black candidates, white supremacy always does go out here and look for individuals they can usually either get 7 to 10 steps ahead of, and they look for these individuals they can get 7 to 10 steps ahead of, because when it comes to black candidates, they don't look to get them elected based on merit. No, they look to get a black candidate basically elected because what white supremacy wants to get is an outcome that will prove one of their axioms true as related to their narrative of black people. And sadly, Eric Adams was one of those guys who, again, he didn't have the critical thinking to understand the subtle politics transpiring around him and how white supremacy basically was setting him up to become the perfect political pawn to be played on their chessboard and played on their chessboard to ensure that that outcome came out as related to the guarantee of their ideal of the black narrative. And what happened with Eric Adams is, again, they basically got 7 to 7 steps ahead of this guy even before he ran for the office of Brooklyn Borough President, most of the white supremacists basically sized this guy up and basically saw that he was one of these bootlicks who was looking to go out here and curry favor with the white supremacists and then use this to their advantage. Because in the system of white supremacy, the only black people they usually allow to advance to any sort of political power are people they easily can, again, I'll repeat it once more, get 7 to 10 steps ahead of, because they want to ensure and guarantee that they are going to get an outcome that will fit their narrative of black people. And when it comes to black people, what many white supremacists want to ensure is that this black person will represent failure on an epic level and represent failure on an epic level, because what they want to do is make the axiom of their narrative of black people to say that if you give a black person power, if you give a black person any sort of power, they won't be able to handle that power in any way, shape, or form. This is a narrative that the white supremacist has pushed ever since the movie Birth of a Nation, and what they want to do is go out here and see that narrative come true, because the insecure white supremacist, to feel secure about himself, has to see a black person failing. So this is why they rig the game to ensure that they get the guarantee of seeing a black person fail when you give them a position of power, by choosing black people who they know they can get in front of, and again basically ensure that that outcome comes to truth. Now with Eric Adams, they basically saw a guy they could easily get in front of, and basically one looking to gain favor with white people. He wasn't looking to be a leader from day one. No, Eric Adams basically was one of these bootlicks who was looking for an easy job and looking for a job in the system of white supremacy. And as he looked for that job, the white supremacists used that to their advantage. And they used it to their advantage because when it came to Eric Adams, again, he wasn't about looking to lead New York City or be an example as New York's second black mayor. No, out of the gate, he was looking to follow behind the leadership of failed leaders like former New York Mayor Bill de Blasio, and ensure that his policies remained in place, not because they would benefit New Yorkers, but because he wanted to curry favor with white supremacy. He wanted to curry favor with white supremacy, never understanding that white supremacy was working against him from day one. And as he went out here looking to curry that favor by doing things like maintaining Bill de Blasio's vaccine mandate against the working people of New York, he basically started working against himself and wound up alienating the black vote. And as he alienated the black vote, he lost his base. And as he lost his base, he couldn't really see how the white supremacist basically was again setting him up for failure, using his own bootlicking against him as related to pushing their agenda of proving their narrative about black people being right. And as they did this, he got into beefs with NBA superstar Kyrie Irving. And as he got into that beef with Kyrie Irving, again, black people, his base, he wound up losing that base. Again, thinking that he could gamble that base to go out here and get a white base, and didn't understand what was going on, is that he never had the white base because the white supremacist never was for Eric Adams. No, he had basically got his head gassed up because he had been in this campaign and again got the attention, again couldn't see the chess moves on the board, and couldn't see how he was basically being used as a political patsy, because what they wanted to do again is show him as the example of incompetence, that in order to make a white man who was incompetent look better in comparison. Now this same strategy was used twice before in my lifetime. I saw it used as related to Ed Koch and the way he basically bungled New York City for over 12 years, and how they got New York Mayor David Dinkins and got him to be the fall guy for all of the problems that took place in New York City that happened over the course of about 20 plus years under Abe Beame, under Ed Koch, and basically made David Dinkins the fall guy for the sad state of New York as related to it being a crime capital with 2,000 murders and overrun with a crack epidemic, basically making David Dinkins the face of failure, because that's the only reason why the white supremacists allowed that first black mayor to become mayor, was to cover up the incompetence of Ed Koch and Abe Beame and every other mayor who came before them that ran the city into the ground. And the same thing happened on a national level with Barack Obama in 2008. A lot of people think, oh, Barack Obama was chosen on merit to be the first black president. No, he was chosen to be the first black president because no white man wanted to come behind George W. Bush and have to clean up the complete collapse of the U.S. economy under his leadership. Now, under George W. Bush's failed leadership, the U.S. economy went into free fall due to things like the subprime mortgage disaster that basically put the entire economy on a shaky ground, because basically people in the banking industry were out here gambling the same way they did during the time of the Great Depression, whether they were buying stocks on margin, and they didn't want to have a white man be out here trying to clean up this mess that they know that they created. So they went out here and allowed this inexperienced junior senator who was black to run for office. And again, this controlled opposition basically wasn't about change for America, but about fitting a narrative that white supremacy wanted to present about black men, and black men being complete failures as related to positions of power. And that was the second time that I saw that in my lifetime, until Bill de Blasio became the next mayor of New York. And when he became the next mayor of New York and basically ran the city into the ground with his far left policies, basically what the politicians didn't want to do was run behind him, because running behind him meant that they would have to actually take ownership and responsibility for the complete mess that the city had become. And this was a subtle politics that Eric Adams couldn't see on the chessboard, that I could see way back when he was saying he was running his campaign. I could see basically what was happening. This guy was being set up for failure from day one. And as he was being set up for failure, he was set up to be the fall guy for the sad state of New York, the sad state of New York that had been established by the dysfunctional Bill de Blasio, and to make that white man look more competent in comparison to a black man. And Eric Adams basically wound up playing the role that white supremacy set up for him, and played it so perfectly that this cream of wheat man basically couldn't even see that he was being cooked, and it was basically sit in this pot, similar to what people say about a frog being killed. I mean, they talk about how they kill frogs in pots and they just bring it to a slow boil, and then as the frog is sitting there, it's thinking everything is okay, but it's not okay, because what's happening is that the frog is being boiled alive, and that's what they were doing to Eric Adams, basically boiling this guy alive and cooking him slow like a pot of cream of wheat. And that's why I call him the cream of wheat man. The cream of wheat man basically thought, oh, I'm the mayor of New York, I'm a mover and shaker. His head was basically gassed. He was out here in his designer suits, again, and going to things like the Met Gala affairs, thinking he was doing something, not understanding the people who put him in power so that they could maintain their status quo. And as they maintained their status quo, basically, again, used him to push their agenda. Now, in a previous video that I did talking about workplace pookies, I always said that when they hire a pookie, they hire him to fit an agenda, and the same thing goes for a black bootlick. When white supremacy hires a black bootlick, they hire the black bootlick basically to fit their agenda, And as that individual is there, they're thinking that they've accomplished something. They're thinking that they've got a good job. But in actuality, you're there to be usually the clown or the workplace jester. And as you're there, you're basically there to give these white people a laugh as related to every day, and then give them a huge punchline to the long-term joke that they have. And the long-term joke that they have usually is to say that this black person could not go out here and meet a level of competence. They could not go out here and meet a level of competence as related to this job. And again, passively they'll give you the job, but aggressively be setting you up to fail so that they can go out here and again prove their axiom as related to black people, saying that they are not competent for leadership, and then use this as a way to close the door on black people ever getting another job. This again was used before as related to David Dinkins, and it was used again for Barack Obama, and also used in the case of Eric Adams. And sadly, in all three cases, these bootlicks basically couldn't see the subtle politics transpiring around them because they were so caught up in their egos about getting the attention of white people and being validated by white people. And because they were so caught up in being validated by white people, they basically could not see that those same white supremacists that they thought were their friends were actually their enemies. And sadly, with Eric Adams, he couldn't see this in any way, shape, or form, or understand it. No, he basically thought he could play both sides, and he thought he could play both sides as related to things. This is where it started to lead to him, again, winding up getting himself in a place where he was set up for failure. Again, he thought, after the vaccine mandate, where he had alienated his black base, he could go out here and thought he could pander to get a bigger Hispanic base by supporting the whole policies that were as related to sanctuary cities, not seeing how both the left and the right were both playing him for a patsy like they played many black mayors in blue cities. Now, when it came down to Texas Governor Greg Abbott, he was the rook on the board, and the rook on the board basically, again, had a plan to set up the pawn. And as he had the plan to set up the pawn, Eric Adams basically just, again, caught up in his emotions, trying to prove something to white people and trying to get white favor, wound up destroying his own career by standing proudly and saying he was standing by New York's sanctuary city policies, standing by these sanctuary city policies and following the law, not understanding the whole game was basically rigged as related to making sure that he would follow their narrative as related to being incompetent. Now, Eric Adams, again, was a guy who was supposed to be a Brooklyn borough president, but didn't understand municipal finance. Again, anyone who understands municipal finance knew that, bringing all these migrants here would be overwhelming to your services because your services are local services and your local budget couldn't handle all of that load. And with your local budget not being able to handle all of that load, again, he didn't understand that, again, thinking that in order to bring those migrants here, again, as they were being bused, you would have to take care of all of these migrants. And he basically thought he could create a covert contract with Joe Biden, thought he could create a covert contract where Joe Biden would pay the federal funding, not understanding, again, how the politics worked as related to federal funding. Now, anyone who understood federal funding like I do understands that money has to go through Congress, and sadly, Eric Adams, not looking at the chessboard, didn't understand that we just got a Republican Congress elected, so the chances of you getting that money were going to be none at all. Moreover, when it came down to Congress, usually it takes years to get money allocated as related to anything. So Eric Adams basically was gambling on Joe Biden, looking to gain favor, hoping that if he maintained the sanctuary city policies that were local, it would lead to him getting a national job. and thinking that he could get a national job in Joe Biden's cabinet, again, didn't understand that the white supremacist was basically, again, making moves on the chessboard, not to make the pawn a queen, but to drop the pawn straight off the board. And as Eric Adams went out here looking to go out here and curry that favor, he created a migrant crisis that basically overwhelmed New York City's finances and basically damaged New York City's budget even worse than it was under Bill de Blasio, proving their narrative about a black person not being competent as related to fiscal management or competent to be able to do their position. So he basically was proving the white supremacist points as related to their narratives about black people as he went out here looking to pander and virtue signal coming from a position of weakness. And as he came from that position of weakness, again, couldn't see how he was alienating members not only from his black base, but the same voters he was trying to pander to in the Hispanic community and those in the white community because they saw his fiscal mismanagement. And as they saw the cream of wheat man basically not being able to cook on the books of the finances, this is where Eric Adams basically went from a guy who was on the road to easy re-election to a guy who was on the road to becoming a one-term mayor. And on the road to becoming a one-term mayor because he had stars in his eyes, never understanding, again, I'll repeat it once more, the subtle politics transpiring around him as related to the system of white supremacy. And as time went on, he started to become frustrated and started to get into his emotions. And as he got into his emotions, this is where he decided to turn on Joe Biden and the Blue Party. And that's where the white supremacists basically gained the advantage over Eric Adams to basically start taking the time to get him off the board. And Eric Adams, again, as he went against the Biden administration as related to the migrant crisis, this is where he wound up in a situation where certain scandals started and investigations started coming out. Now, these investigations had been going on ever since the Obama years. There had been people looking to do investigations on him because, again, white supremacy, again, doesn't choose people they can't get behind. They always choose people they can get in front of 7 to 10 steps ahead. And as they got in front of Eric Adams, they started to say, hey, this guy, basically, he's playing everywhere we want him to play. Now we're going to go out here and make the moves to get him off the board by, again, taking the information we already have and starting to use it against him. It's similar to what happened with Sean P. Diddy Combs. P. Diddy Combs basically thought he was going to be able to leverage on these white people at Ciroc. And what happened with P. Diddy Combs is that he went out here trying to file a lawsuit, thinking everything was fair, not understanding in the system of white supremacy, everything is never fair because in a system of goodies, giveaways, and guarantees, nothing is fair. And they basically played the card that basically checkmated Diddy by showing the videotape of him assaulting Cassie, which he thought he had basically bought and hid. He didn't understand in the system of white supremacy, they've always got a copy of things on people that they basically are 7 to 10 steps ahead of and look to expose that on that person. And as they look to expose that on that person, they then use it to tarnish their reputation. And the same thing happened here to Eric Adams. Basically, he thought, oh, I'm going to turn against the Biden administration, turn against the Blue Party, and didn't understand that at that point they decided to turn up the heat on the cream of wheat man, to ensure that he would leave the office of mayor in the most ignominious fashion, and it's by saying that he was basically caught up in all sorts of corruption as related to business deals he made when he was the Brooklyn borough president with places like the as related to the Turkish consulate, thinking, oh, he was again one of those black people who were in, not understanding all of those Turkish people were not with him, not understanding that the Asian lady he was working with was not with him. Again, he thought, oh, I have arrived, I'm the special black. No, there are no special blacks in the system of white supremacy, and a series of scandals basically undermined the entire Adams administration, exposing it as one of the most corrupt administrations in the history of New York City, as alleged by federal prosecutors, and that basically led to Eric Adams' ignominious fall as the mayor of New York City, and again created the guaranteed concrete example that white supremacy wanted to see as related to a black man in a leadership position. Because again, like I said before, when it comes down to black men in leadership positions, white supremacy doesn't choose a black man based on his qualifications. No, they choose a black man who they can get 7 to 10 steps ahead of to ensure that they can get a certain outcome, because they want that certain outcome so that they can passively say, hey, we gave a black man a chance, but aggressively want to say that this black person failed, and this is why we shouldn't allow black people into positions of power. We shouldn't allow black people into positions of power because every time they're put into power, they are not competent enough to meet a standard, when in actuality the entire system is basically rigged to ensure that they have a failure so that they can continue to maintain the system of white power and try to make it look like white people are the ones who can only be trusted with power to control everything in society. That's basically the reason why they go get guys like Eric Adams and don't bring in guys based on merit. And again, don't want to bring in black men based on merit because, again, it's all about, again, hiring a pookie to fit an agenda. And Eric Adams basically fit that agenda to a T, the same way David Dinkins and Barack Obama fit that agenda to a T, fit the agenda that they wanted to present about black incompetence, fit that agenda they wanted to fit about black people not being capable of fitting a leadership role. And there are others who have basically fit that same narrative, like Lori Lightfoot. Lori Lightfoot was set up to be the patsy in Chicago and the fall girl in that situation. And the same thing happened here to New York Mayor Eric Adams. Again, he couldn't see how he was being set up to be a patsy and a pawn on the chessboard. A pawn on the chessboard that they basically managed to get to leave in the most ignominious fashion, so that when people become so traumatized, they never want to elect another black person or see a black person on that level of competence. But that was all by design because they wanted to show that they could rig the game, again, by picking their patsy, picking their bootlick. Again, a guy they got 7 to 10 steps ahead of, and basically got him off the board because it's, again, about an agenda and a series of outcomes that fit white supremacy. And that's basically what's being done here now as related to Eric Adams, and everything again fit white supremacy's narrative to a T. Again, he was the perfect tool, and again ended his career in the most perfect way for the white supremacists, because now the white supremacists can now point to him as a historical example of what happens when you give a black man power, and when that black man gets power, the series of mistakes he would make when given that power, because he's considered to again be so emotional and running on his emotions that he basically operates on thinking, oh, I'm going to get this position, I'm going to be able to do what like white people do, not understanding the white supremacist has a whole different standard set up for a black man in power, and again set up to make him fail. Now, the only thing, now after Eric Adams basically played this Lions to a T, he thought he could go over to the orange man and basically thinks he's going to get a position, but I don't think he's going to get that position because, again, when it comes to the white supremacists, they love to yank the rug out from under black bootlicks as a way to, again, get that punchline, get the punchline for the cruel joke they love to play on black people. I mean, it's no different than what Ralph Ellison presented in his legendary novel Invisible Man. about the black men who were on the carpet, thinking they weren't going to get money, but the carpet was electrified. He's thinking he's going to be able to fail upwards and get the ambassadorship to Saudi Arabia. But again, when white supremacy has a tool that they have broken, they look to keep it broken. And I always looked at both. Again, this guy doesn't understand neither side is on a black person's side, and basically doesn't understand that white supremacy is looking to break a tool. And again, when they look to break a tool, they look to break him in the most ignominious fashion and make sure that he leaves the board in the most ignominious way. And Eric Adams was shown to leave the board in the most ignominious way. I mean, here you have a man sitting next to a picture of his mother, again, showing us the ultimate position of weakness as a man, showing us the ultimate position of weakness, because a man is supposed to be strong enough to, again, stand as a man. But this guy is basically sitting here next to a picture of his mother, again, a picture of weakness. And again, all of this is ingrained to be burned on the minds of foundational black Americans and the world. Again, this is all about creating a narrative and an outcome as related to black people. And again, Eric Adams basically wound up playing that role, again, being the cream of wheat man who basically got cooked. And as he got cooked, he really sadly still doesn't see the subtle politics transpiring around him. He still thinks he has favor in the system of white supremacy, a system that basically was working against him ever since he decided to leave the police force and decided to get into politics. And I would even say, even when he was in the police force, basically these people were working against him. And sadly, this guy, he was so ambitious and caught up in trying to succeed in the system of white supremacy that he couldn't see that he was the perfect pawn, who they basically, and I'll repeat it again, got 7 to 10 steps ahead of. And again, when it comes to black people, we have to understand, if they picking you for a high position, it's never for your good. It's always for the system of white supremacy. And usually the people who they do give money to, or any sort of power, again, these are pawns on the chessboard, and they can easily expel those pawns, which is why you just don't want to play the rigged game, because the game you will never win, because the game was never designed for you to win. And their way of winning, again, is to make sure that you lose, as related to things. And that's what Eric Adams' whole story is all about, in pushing the general narrative that black people are failures, black people are losers, because white supremacy loves to see a story of black failure. They love to see a story of black failure because that's fitting their narrative. And this is why this system is so evil. This is why this system is so evil, because it's never about, again, empowering black people, but choosing black people they can continue to get power over. And that's what happened here as related to the tragic story of Eric Adams and his ignominious fall from grace. Now, if you want to pick up some of my books on the SJS Direct imprint, you can find those books on Amazon.com in paperback and Kindle format. You can also find at other online booksellers like Draft the Digital, Barnes & Noble, Google Play, and big box retailers like Walmart and Target. And if you want to see me make more videos taking black bootlegs like Eric Adams to the barbecue, you can drop a donation to the Patreon, the PayPal, or the Cash App by clicking the links in the description box. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe.
Now available in paperback and e-readers, ISIS Legacy. The sorority secrets of the goddess next door are revealed in this all-new ISIS series adventure. Get ISIS Legacy in paperback and e-readers at online booksellers everywhere. Now available in paperback and e-readers, Spinsterella Goth Girl Summer. Take a trip into the macabre world of goth modeling in the new millennium in this spooktacular Spinsterella story. Pick up your copy of Spinsterella Goth Girl Summer in paperback and e-readers at Amazon.com and online booksellers everywhere. Support black-owned and black-operated digital broadcast media. www.niceradionetwork.com. Nice Radio Network, broadcasting 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.